We are here in Mongolia. It's the 21st of June and we have snow. This is interesting. You know, I've always avoided coming to Mongolia in September or any time before May. Usually it's June. Last year I did May, but I ran away to Mongolia to get my Z8. Sorry, to Malaysia to get my Z8 because it was a bit chilly here. So instead of staying a few days, I spent a couple weeks to avoid the cold temperatures. This kind of gear is not what I expected to be wearing for summer. And today is June 21st. So first day of summer. And look what we have. So while the camera adjusts to my face, I'm expecting the Z6 III. This is the camera that I've been looking forward to before ever considering the Z8. And I want to spend some time talking more about it with you guys. You probably saw my last video when I talked about the Z6 III and the design process and what the guys in Japan talked about and what they went through to get the camera where it was. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you guys about what I think about the Z6 III, how it compares to the competition, and how I think it'll do in the market. We're going to look at some of the pros and the cons. I don't really consider them cons, but I think things that we could have gotten that we didn't get. But if you want to call it cons, you can. So let me get set up so we can talk about, well, not this, but the Z6 III. Before we begin, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support the channel, there are links for items to purchase in the description area of each video. All right, so you've got a little view of Mongolia, so you can see what it's like here. It's not always like this, you know. Yeah, probably talked about the fact that Mongolia can be minus 40 degrees in the wintertime, and you can experience all 4 seasons in one day. Yeah, it's my first time seeing snow in the summertime, but you know, the world's having crazy weather. Nonetheless, you're here to hear about the Z6 III and its competition. So let's dive into that for a moment. Over the past few years, there have been a number of camera releases that's been coming out that's been pretty darn good. I have to say there's some excellent stuff coming in the $2,000 to $2,500 price range. The S5 IIX, we have the Fuji X-H2, X-H2S, and also we can talk about Sony's A7 IV. Now, when we look at all these cameras, the Fuji is the only one that is APS-C. The rest are full frame. Now, I won't forget that there's a GH7 that just got released and GH9, or was it G9? I forgot what it is. I think it's G9 II. So those are a little different. So we'll stick to the full frame censored cameras because while those cameras are not full frame, they do have some amazing specs in them also. You know, I've talked about wanting to try Panasonic out because I've liked the color science that I've seen. I like the way the picture looks. It kind of remind me of the Leica look. And when I take photography, I like that. But I'll say this, I've watched Petapixel's video and I noticed that they were shooting with, I believe it was a Z6 II for the video, and it sort of looked almost like that Panasonic. I may have to watch again and see if it's Panasonic they shot with or is it Z6 II, but I'm fairly sure they were using the Z6 II. There were a couple of the channels that I saw also. And the one thing that I did notice that all of them had a similar filter on. So maybe that could be something as to why they kind of look the same, or maybe their color grading styles are similar. The color I'm used to seeing from Nikon is different. I don't know if it's a sensor thing. I don't have the camera in hand to talk about just yet. You know, the one thing that I was kind of concerned about, I'm not really worried about right now, and that is this camera coming with a cooling fan. Most of these cameras are doing 4K 60, and some are doing 4K 60 with a crop. None that I recall is doing 4K 60 internally with RAW. Usually you have to output that to an external drive or external recorder. The A7 IV, it's a few years old at this point. It was after the Z6 II was released, 32 megapixels, but odd thing is they never gave it 6K. And I guess at the time 6K wasn't really a big thing because it's a 7K sensor 7K, yeah, 7K sensor that was being downsampled to 4K. So you had pretty good image quality out of that. But I think there was also a crop on the sensor when you go to the higher recording, like 4K 60. I was surprised that they didn't give us 6K on that sensor, in that camera, I should say. But hey, it is what it is. Sony does have some great stabilization, dynamic range on that camera. But I know that having the FX30 with the advanced stabilization, that took it to another level. Seeing what my Z8 can do and using the ZF with vibration reduction and electronic stabilization turned on, yeah, that beats those. Now, the Z6 III, it's pretty much using a lot of the same tech that we're seeing in the the ZF, not the Z6 II, but the ZF. Because the ZF is basically the Z6 II sensor on steroids. Better autofocus, they've given it vibration, what's it called? Focus point vibration. There's the manual focus subject detection, which is a great thing. Getting the pre-capture from the Z8, Z9, awesome. 120 frames per second. Yeah, it's 10 frames per second, but come on guys. I mean, most photographers who are shooting, you want to have the capture and the lightest amount of image quality, well, the lightest file size to get you the good image quality to ship that off to your production team. So it's not a major thing when people say, hey, it should be doing this at RAW. People talk about these things. When you have to cull through that many photos and then try to find the right one when you're at a sporting event and you need to get your stuff out fast, that just doesn't work. Editing it is going to be another step that you just don't want to do there. So if you can get everything out of the camera really well in one shot, or whatever image you shot to give you that right image that you're looking for, that's important. Now, as someone who's been shooting Z6, Z6 II, and now Z8, there's some things I see that are different. Of course, the ISO being the main one. The lower ISO on the Z8 at 664 can take some pretty good low light shots. But of course, when you are shooting low light, you don't want to be at 64 and not be shooting with a tripod. I mean, I've tried it myself to see how far I can go on hand holding the camera, and yeah, I got a couple shots. But of course, when you bump up the ISO a bit more, then you get a bit more noise. And the noise on the Z6 II and Z6 have been clean. And from what I've been seeing from the ZF, there is what they call advanced noise reduction. Now, we know that different camera makers call the things something slightly different. Nikon touted it, but it didn't tout it in a way that, when Canon released their, the announcement for the R1, where they talk about, in-camera noise reduction. I think it's probably going to be a similar thing. And I've always said this, Nikon doesn't do a great job when it comes to marketing their stuff. Now, if you watch my last video where I talk about how great the camera was and give you information about the Japanese guy, engineers and designers talking about the camera, that's the kind of stuff I'd like to see from the US market side and showing what this camera is capable of, or any Nikon camera for that matter. And even on the page, even though they put some information out there, Sony kind of gives you like little pictures, and then they have all the things that it can do underneath there. Everybody does like a small amount of information on their launch video, but Sony seems to be a little bit better when they give you the information. I've seen Fuji site, I've seen Panasonic site, they're kind of similar. Nikon is getting there. But when you have your ambassadors talking about the camera, I kind of wish that would go into more of those things. But I guess it's like launch day, just get the information out and be done with it. The Japanese folks, they sat down and explained the whole idea behind why they made this camera. And let me touch on one of the things that kind of caught me, and it is the EVF. This thing has been around for, I guess through the Z9 development. And they could have put it in the Z9, or really they could have put it in the Z8. But I think the whole idea was, the circuitry would need some retweaking and probably reprogramming the processor to make everything happen. And the Z8, they had time to do it, but I guess, redoing a circuit board to make all that happen, they didn't want to do that. And they probably want to save some of that wow factor for the Z6 III. You know, our term is they're sandbagging. Nikon is kind of held back on that tech to throw it in the next camera. They did kind of say that, it made it seem as though the Z6 III was not coming, and because customers made a lot of requests, they figure, hey, you know what, we need to get this out here because people out there waiting for something, they're jumping ship. If we want to keep these guys happy, we definitely need to come up with something that is going to keep them in our camp. And while some of us did jump ship, most of us who've been shooting Nikon for years like the colors, we like the ergonomics of the camera, we like the fact that it's weather sealed, they're tough, and you can use them in just about any conditions with no issues. I've heard one channel mention, you know, why don't they have like a electronic hot shoe? It's kind of nice in my sort of camera to stick my microphone up there with no cable running into the camera. But then the downside to that is if water gets on that thing, it could cause issues. And I've seen other videos online where people have got water on the hot shoe and, you know, damage the camera. So for me, nah. I've seen Canon's version of it, and they have like something that you can slide on there with like a rubber cup that covers up the shoe when something is mounted into it. But if you forget to slide that little thing back in there and you're walking around and you're out shooting in the rain, yeah, that may be some issue that you don't want to deal with. As I talk ergonomics, when I saw the body of the Z6 III, just from the photographs, the leak photo, I noticed that the camera was going to be thicker. The rumored specs, to me, it was definitely worth doing that, because while the Z6 II and Z6 were pretty good in the hand, I think for most people who don't want to go to mirrorless because they didn't like the lighter, you know, smaller body, now you can get a camera that feels substantial in the hand and that you can hold, and it has a certain amount of thickness to it that feels good. The ZF, I balked on that one, you know, for the thickness of like the DF, I probably would have jumped on it because it's kind of like that feel in my hand, and the fact that they had to have a cage on the bottom. Plus, now do more video, I wanted the Z6 III because a flip forward screen with better codecs, that's something that I like. Plus, when I travel around, I want something that is a bit lighter to pack. You know, weight is an issue when you're traveling on planes, and especially like going from like Ulaanbaatar down to Dalai by plane, you know, it's like a puddle jumper, turboprop. You're limited as how much you can carry. So yeah, you have to think about, you know, all those things. That being said, the camera on a whole, it looks like it's going to be amazing. And a lot of people are actually getting the cameras in hand. Just this morning, I saw there are a couple of sites that they have actual cameras that they're utilizing, not pre-production models. And these are still like ambassadors. We're talking about the cameras. I saw a shot that someone posted, I think it was Facebook or something, and they were all going home with their Z6 III. Normally you kind of get like, hey, the camera is announced today and there's a launch date on this date. B&H says the 25th, so let's hope it's the 25th. I don't know when it's going to happen in Malaysia for me to get it. They don't sell the higher end Nikon cameras here. I went to the store and, you know, what I saw, the latest was the P1000. They didn't have anything else sitting around, which is kind of odd, no mirrorless camera. The guys were walking around asking to take photos on the plaza. They're using D200s. So that's tell you how things are here when it comes to Nikon. The things that I would have liked to see, while the EVF is fantastic, rear screen. You know, when you flip that out and you utilize that, I would have preferred one, if it was a multi-angle screen like the A7R5 or some kind of version like the Panasonic S1H, where it kind of tilts up and then you can flip out the screen. The difference with the Panasonic is that it doesn't tilt down. Fuji has a kind of similar system where it flips down, but it doesn't flip out. Now I get from what the engineers were saying that they were trying to keep this camera light, and it's now, I think it moved up like 0.2 pounds, 1.5 to 1.7 or 1.67 pounds. So it's still, you know, midway, because the Z8 is 2 pounds. And while the camera went a little bit taller, it still kind of kept the same footprint for the most part. It is wider slightly, and I think all of that is for heat dissipation, because now you're adding a camera, well, you're adding a sensor that can perform better. It can do raw. You do it internally in a sealed body. So from what I've seen, Richie did a test. He was trying to do a battery test, but it kind of ended up being almost like an overheating test, which showed that the camera can record and fill up the memory card and keep going and not overheat. No overheat message came up on the card. Yeah, on the card, and none on the camera itself. I've gotten card and camera warnings on Z8, and I don't know if it's because of humidity or something, but that was at 4K. I've tested the camera with air conditioning on and recorded for 20 minutes from a 1 terabyte card, and it ran until the end and the camera didn't shut down. So in good conditions, in the right conditions, you can record with no issue. The other part of the screen issues, let's call it number 2. I was hoping that they would put an HDR screen on the back of it. It's nice that they have pretty much an HDR screen inside the EVF. When you record outside, there is no issue with the Z8 that I've used outside, and being able to turn up the brightness and see when I'm outside in the bright sun. But I was hoping, since the camera does HLG, to have at least a HDR monitor in the back that we can use. Now, I'm fully aware that there is a power requirement that goes into this, and Nikon has not developed a EL15D. We're still on C, which is a little bit more high capacity to run these cameras. Nor is there a new battery type coming. Maybe in the future they'll come up with something, the different battery type, and utilize the grip to put something bigger in there. We'll see. But the screen, that's something that I would have liked. That was my only other, main con that I think about. As far as photography use, it's going to meet my use case and most people's use case and exceed it because of how high I can shoot. The low noise performance is going to be fantastic. I'm not a bird shooter or nature shooter, so the pre-capture is not really something for me. It's in my camera. I've not tested it out. I like the fact that you can record in HLG, in photo and in video mode, and I've tried both on my Z8, and it works really, really well. I think overall, from looking at what the other guys are doing, yes, there's some video stuff that I think the camera is going to be lacking. While it's supposed to have waveform, I don't see anyone talking about that much as far as how it looks. It's probably going to be the same little small thing in the corner of the screen compared to some of the other guys where you can, have it in color. Well, not maybe hybrid guys. We're talking like Blackmagic and those guys that have like a color version you can put on there. And most of us really don't need to shoot raw. The SDR mode works pretty darn well. I'm kind of worried still about the 422 versus 420. And I mean, it's not a worry. It's nice to have the higher quality for sure, but as long as it's there for raw, that still works out fine. So that's not a major issue. And as someone who shot 8K raw, the images can look fantastic, but they can be a pain to edit. First time I shot 8K, I used the UHD version on the Z8, and it works fine. I did kind of notice that when I shoot an N-Log and I go in manual mode, the file size are smaller than if I shoot it in program mode or aperture mode. And I'm wondering, maybe there's some noise reduction or something. I don't know. Something is added that makes the file size bigger in program mode than when it compares to manual mode. I think for those people who are still looking at DSLRs, who own DSLRs and are still on the fence, I believe the Z6 III is going to be that camera that's going to get people who are still on DSLRs to move from DSLRs into mirrorless. It's a beefier camera. It's going to be good to hold in the hand. And, I'm talking about from just the pictures that I'm seeing, and for someone who used the Z8, I had a D300, a D200, and a 500, and my D300 was like my workhorse with a grip on it. And it was always with me wherever I went. There's something about the beefy camera in your hand that just, felt really good to work with. Initially, when I tried the Z6, I was like, it's too light. I walked out the store in Hong Kong and I went around. My wife was like, but it's lighter than your current camera. Wouldn't you want something that's lighter? And I'm like, yeah, you have a point. We're getting older, you want lighter, and that's how I ended up with the Z6 and in the mirrorless. So those of you who are still on the fence, you know, this camera offers a lot of great features that is going to make it well worth the upgrade. And if you're someone who worries about the flip out screen, don't. I think most photographers are shooting through the viewfinder anyway and looking at the screen to check your shots. But if you want a low angle and you know you don't want to use the viewfinder and you like holding it sideways and going on low, you tilt the screen out and it's right there. You can look at it and you can see the subject. Some people say it's weird to look at things off to the side. I was in that camp when I used my Fix-30 and it had no viewfinder. I got used to that very quickly. So life's about change. And this is another one of those things that we have to get used to. Things change, we adapt. Humans are very good at adapting. We're also good at complaining. You're going to complain before we adapt. And as we know, it takes everyone time to make changes in their mind to get to the next thing. And once it becomes, you know, readily available and the old stuff is no longer, yeah, we adapt to it and we can get used to it. Some people are stubborn and they won't, and if that's you, it's okay. DSLRs are still out there and other cameras are out there that don't have flip out screens. If you have any questions about the Z6 III, I've been perusing the Japanese site and the European site and looking at information that we kind of missed. You saw in the video, I put some clips in there about the things that I found. And it's always good to, you know, look at what everyone else is saying and how they view things in the cameras and the camera world in general. So I want to hear if you have any questions or any things that I can answer for you. I'll put together another video and post that. But thanks for watching as always. I want to ask you to remember to subscribe to the channel if you're not yet subscribed. And please give the video a thumbs up when you watch it. It helps the algorithms to get the video out to more people. Or you can share it with your friends. That's another way of getting the video out. And for those of you who keep watching and keep coming back to see me, thank you. I appreciate it very much. It's a small channel and I may not post as often because, you know, life happens and sometimes I plan things and they just don't happen in the timeline that I want them to. It's not that I'm neglecting my duties, but I'm retired. You know, sometimes you want to live your life and go out and have fun. There's nothing wrong with that. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.